originally I had the idea, since this is 4th of July weekend, we're recording on July 3rd, dear listeners, all two of you or whatever. I pitched originally that we should watch America the Motion Picture on Netflix, the new animated movie that just came out.
Yep.
Which appears to be some sort of comical, over-the-top dramatization of the American Revolution, in which many of the Founding Fathers seem to be portrayed as superheroes.
Or commandos or something.
Yes. And PK said that he didn't think that he could sit through that.
Yeah. I just on watching the trailer, it looked funny. Indeed, I would definitely get a kick out of watching it, but I don't know on the 4th of July weekend in honor of our country if I could endure everything that style of humor entails. I don't know if I was just like maybe at some other point, but like on this weekend I feel like myself personally would feel like it would be too disrespectful for the cause of our country.
That's fine. I just I appreciate
it's very much your style.
Yes.
It's very much your humor, and so
I appreciate that you didn't want to sit through over the top, just nonsense, irreverent humor, we'll say, and so instead you decided, let's watch 2.5 hours of torture murder porn.
I wouldn't say porn, I'd say more propaganda if you read the critics for the movie.
I didn't really read much into the critical reception. I did catch the reviews, the overall ratings. I didn't read anything specifically, but when I caught I think the Rotten Tomatoes and the Google user score and whatever, they were a lot higher than I actually expected it to be. I want to say it was 93% or something like that, which honestly
really? Wow.
I was not expecting it to be that high. So
was that after watching it or before watching it?
That was after I watched the movie. And I don't want to... It's not like there's anything in it that would make me feel like, it'd get review bombed necessarily, but I just wasn't expecting the movie to have a 93% positivity rating. I think that... Let me double check.
That is very high.
Yeah. Let me see. Rotten Tomatoes. It's always weird, and we'll get into this more in terms of the production of the movie, but... Zero Dark 30. My clicky keyboard, I'm sure, is making everyone just so happy. Yeah, 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's the critical score, and 80% audience score.
That's very interesting. So when did we name the movie that we watched? I can't remember.
I thought we said Zero Dark 30 already, but we watched Zero Dark 30 for anyone if we didn't say it already. So there you go.
Zero Dark 30. Because it came out relatively... Ironically, it's kind of a very similar context or situation to Munich that we watched.
Yes, I did think about that as I was watching it.
And I didn't intend for that dynamic at all. But basically, it's a historical... I guess you could say historical fiction. It's just it's based on a historical event. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's dramatized, whatever, for viewing pleasure about something that happened relatively recent involving jihadist groups.
In this case is very interesting because there are similarities to sort of Munich and also differences. So yes, a real event transpired. I guess there's a similarity. A lot of the facts around the event are classified. So again, similar in that respect. And so there's a lot of creative license, I guess you could say, that is taken in telling the story because a lot of it isn't really necessarily known. More is known about these events, and even if a lot of details are left out by the U.S. government, at least in this situation, there is no denial. The U.S. government had a press conference later the same day and was we did this.
Well, Munich was involving Mossad and Israeli intelligence,
yes,
which is not really U.S. jurisdiction. So,
and neither is But to be clear, what I mean by that is like the Israel did not have a press conference after they executed all these different people in these like planned hits. They didn't go out and then say like we killed these guys because we were getting back at them for being a part of the Munich massacre, as opposed to in this case where it's like, well, it's Osama bin Laden, even if technically the way we did it was sort of questionable, like in terms of some of the international laws. It's also like, it was Osama bin Laden, like sure, you violated a sovereign country's the airspace or whatever and conducted essentially a military operation on the soil of a country that you weren't really at war with, that you were technically allied with, but it's Osama bin Laden, and I think it was just the U.S. didn't trust the Pakistan government enough to actually tell them they were going to do this in advance, because I'm guessing it's not like they're worried that like the whole of the Pakistan government is like secretly in line with Osama bin Laden, but it's also not that much of a stretch to say if they had told someone, then probably someone down the line would have gotten word to somebody, and that would have gotten out to this particular gentleman who's particularly dangerous. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is or how historically accurate this is, but in the movie it was portrayed that when they had the go assassinate bin Laden, go kill him, like the chick that was heading the whole endeavor didn't even know until like the evening of that night they were gonna go, like it was a go.
Yes.
So it looked like it was all very hush, and they didn't want to risk any leak at all.
Yeah, that's actually, I don't know if how like, because I feel like we're rushing to the end a little bit. There's a scene where I feel like it's a combination scene, so to speak, where they kind of are doing some exposition, combining things in a way that probably wouldn't have happened in reality. It's an Area 51, amusingly, so Area 51 makes an appearance in this film, and that's where they get their, special, the alien spaceships they used. I mean, they used two modified, secret sauce Black Hawk helicopters that had been modified heavily with all sorts of stealth tech.
So that way they could easily crash on bin Laden's rooftop.
Yes, which in fairness, that actually probably would have happened no matter what type of helicopter they were using. I can't remember the exact term, but basically there was, in the movie, they actually, another little discrepancy in the movie, they almost make it look like they're like, I'm losing power or something, and then the helicopter looks like it's spinning, and then it crashes into the compound, and then everyone hops out. In reality, what happened is I guess like the high walls, they mentioned, I think there's like 14-foot high walls or something like that around the whole compound. And so they were going to fast rope. The helicopter wasn't actually supposed to land in the compound at all. They were going to hover over the compound. They were going to fast rope out of the helicopter onto the ground. And then the helicopter would presumably, go away and orbit the area or something. As the SEAL team made entry. So what happened, though, is that the helicopter was hovering over the compound, and they're like solid walls that are very high, and so the air obviously can't go through the walls, and it created basically like a vortex effect that happens in certain other situations. It's not like this is an unheard of thing. Like, this is a known issue with helicopters in certain situations. And basically that created an unstable air mass that caused all sorts of problems, and the helicopter started to, behave in a way that could have been bad, and it was actually like a smart move on the pilot's part that he just pushed the nose into the ground, like, because these are also very experienced individuals, obviously, that have been chosen for this operation. Correct. And so the pilot, I think, recognized immediately what was happening, and just nosed the helicopter into the ground because they were pretty low, and the tail got hung up on the wall of the compound, and then incredibly, like, no one was hurt, probably in part large part thanks to the decision to just immediately react and just be like, all right, well, screw it. Like, we're going down. I'm going to choose the manner of our own crashing if we are going to go down. So
right. I was surprised that, like, this movie in general felt like with Spielberg and Munich, I felt like there was definitely more of a creative license in that movie where there was a lot more personality and you got to know the people more. It was a lot more in depth, I guess, personally. This movie, for whatever reason, it was, I think, like just as long, but it felt a lot more just like, I don't know, fact oriented, or it was just moving from one plot point to another.
Yeah,
next.
I really disliked that.
Really? I found it equally engaging.
Okay.
I guess you didn't, but I mean, by the end of Munich, I was still feeling like, wow, this movie needs to end. If it does feel long, and I was kind of feeling the same thing by the end of Zero Dark 30.
Yeah, and I definitely felt by the time we get to the end of this movie's like 2.5 hours long, and I was like, this movie felt like it didn't need to be this long, and like it feels like the characters, I don't know why, like a lot of the character development happens in a way that's, it's just not super great, like, or there's very little effort put into it. So we have our main character, Maya, who is a fictional CIA agent who is allegedly based off of, like, a combination of real people. In reality,
I read that it was, like, a woman that was...
There was a woman that heavily inspired it, who was actually a very different type of person than the person that Maya is.
Really?
Interestingly, because the woman that she's allegedly based off of, I can't remember her name, but she had actually been in the agency for quite a while. And then Maya, meanwhile, is recruited like right out of high school, basically. She's like this young agent. This is like her only op that she's ever worked on. And the woman that her character is apparently based off of had been like in the agency for a long time, like pre 9/11. And then she was kind of like one of the, in charge of hunting down Osama bin Laden post 9/11. So I don't know, like why they did certain things like that. I wish they had done more to build Maya's character. It's Jessica Chastain is the actress. I thought it was Bryce Dallas Howard for a second. Watching the movie, like, forgive me, but it's Jessica Chastain. And then, like, she gets, like, basically no character development. Like, her character is that she's hunting Osama bin Laden.
Her personality seems to be very, we don't really get a backstory on her. Like, she could easily be a character that there is some kind of backstory for. Like, why is she this way? We never get that in the movie. I kind of appreciated that to the extent where it's like, that can be, I don't know, it can be such a cliche move sometimes to like, this person is this way and here's exactly why this person is this way, because when they were a kid,
yeah, and when they were a kid, she dreamed of catching Osama bin Laden, even though 9/11 hadn't happened yet. She knew this was her destiny.
Yes. It seems that it's just her personality to be so, like, it looks like she struggles with friends. Like, she doesn't have a lot of friends. Mm-hmm. She's a type of person who really, and apparently you said this is not really based on the personality of the true, real individual. But in the movie,
personality perhaps maybe, but like I just know that like the way they set up her character is apparently, like I said, she's not. It's like this is the only thing she's ever done. She's like a relatively young character in the movie as opposed to like this relatively older woman in real life who had worked with the CIA like before any of this had ever happened.
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe she was like that in personality, but she really just kind of seemed like this person who just keeps to herself. But there's not really a person in the movie aside from her enemies that doesn't like her. Like, no one dislikes her personality. Like they all kind of like. There's something about her strong personality.
Yeah, even if they think that like some of her theories are like, oh, this seems a little far fetched. It's like no one like really hates her. They just like don't. They just think her job, like they think she should do her job differently sometimes. Yeah. And like that's part of the. It's a little Hollywood for me. Part of this movie with Maya and like this like single-minded devotion to tracking down Osama bin Laden, because there's like multiple scenes in the movie that make it feel like it's Maya against the world, and like that she is single-handedly tracking down Osama bin Laden, and not only, you know, is she working against the terrorists and the Taliban, she's also like working against like her own superiors that are like, Maya, I need you to be like doing, you know, this other intel. Like there's an attack that happened, the attempted Times Square bombing in 2010, which is a real event. Like that happens. Thankfully, no one is injured. Just like, you know, real life. And then like her boss is like, we need to be focused on the homeland or something, and she's like, I need to catch Osama bin Laden because if he's the one telling people to attack the homeland. And it's like, I think in reality the CIA has a lot of people that work for it, and if that's Maya's like prime directive, is like that's her mission. It's not like, I don't think CIA agents like decide for themselves what they do. Like, I'm pretty sure it gets assigned to them. Like, yeah. So if her job, you know, was assigned, you know, when she worked for the agency, like, hey, you're gonna track down Osama bin Laden or like any other high-profile Al-Qaeda people that you can, like, it seems like they'd probably just leave her doing that. There probably would be other teams dedicated to other tasks. You know what I mean? It doesn't really make sense unless like something incredibly major happens, which, like an attempted car bomb going off in New York City that kills no one. Respectfully, it's really not that major of an event. Like, it's like, okay, the guy tried to make a car bomb. He didn't do a very good job because the bomb didn't even go off. And no one got hurt. It's like, yeah, it could have been bad, potentially, but, like, it wasn't. And also, like, you know, it's like, it's just like, it doesn't seem like that's the sort of thing that you'd be like, we need to retask the whole agency. It's like, no, like, keep doing what you're doing. Like, in, you know, the team that covers domestic threats, which might not even be the CIA, because I feel like the CIA is a mostly outside the U.S. organization. You'd probably be like the NSA or the Department of Homeland Security or whatever. Like, it'd be more their area. Like, those people, you know, they need to do a better job, like, so they get reprimanded or whatever. It's like, quit spying on, like, you know, random Joe's, like, emails or something. Like, stop trying to record everyone's phone calls, like, in the whole country, and maybe, like, actually focus on, like, more targeted counterterrorism stuff. I don't know. Like, and, oh, by the way, to the NSA agent listening to this call, like, thank you for your work. But, like, the, it seems weird. Like, it's very Hollywood to be like, oh, it's Maya against the world, and her bosses don't quite understand, and she's the only one. Like, in reality, I think was probably, like, a team of people, and this is one of the criticisms against the movie that's been raised by actual government people, is, like, it's not like one person tracked down Osama bin Laden. And I feel like that could have been a much more interesting movie if we'd had more scenes. I feel like this movie is like, it's like a series of things that happen, but the movie doesn't do the best job of, like, spelling it out how it's all connected. It just, there's a bunch of events, and, like, if you're paying attention, like, and I'm literally taking notes while we're watching this, and it wasn't the first time I've seen it, but, like, I'm literally taking notes as I watched this movie again, to talk about it on this show. Like, I'm following what's happening, roughly. But, like, I feel like if I'm just in the theater watching this movie, like, this movie doesn't really do you any favors at, like, trying to, like, help you, like, connect with what's going on. Like, it's not, like...
That's true. It was definitely a rough start. The first, like, 5 or 10 minutes was kind of like, there's a ton of dialogue and names being thrown around, and you just kind of go, oh, look, it's CIA people doing CIA things. Okay.
Yeah. And, like, there's so many things that just feel like missed opportunities, where it's like, there's, like, and again, like, you can't even use the defense of, like, well, what if that's how it actually happened, because apparently it's not. Like, and also, like, there's going to be a lot of creative, you know, leeway that's taken in this, because, like, the CIA is not going to give you the names of the agents that actually were responsible for tracking down Osama bin Laden, because, like, they don't want those people to die. Yeah. So, like, there's a lot of, you know, creative room to work. for telling the story in a way that is, accurate to the CIA's methods that would have probably been used, but obviously not the real way that maybe everything would have exactly happened. You just have to fit in all of the facts that you are given in the official information, and then probably fill in the blanks a little bit, do a little bit of investigative journalism type stuff to maybe find stuff that wouldn't be put out in the official press release. But there's a lot of creative freedom you have in terms of actually showing the agents working to track down Osama bin Laden, and how the press, how their little meetings and how the conferences would go, and the types of discussions they'd have. There's a scene where she gets a photo, and then she's goes up to a wall, and it's all these other photos of different people, and it's she's making connections, but she doesn't really say anything. And it's where's the scene where it's we go up to the wall and it's this guy, we were talking to this guy, and then draw the line across the whiteboard or whatever, and then that let us there's no I don't the movie doesn't have to be that you don't have to make it too dumb, you don't have to speak down to us too much, but a scene where someone just kind of lays out the whole case would probably be beneficial if you actually want us to follow the whole CIA plot particularly.
I noticed that in the movie, how there was never a talking down to the audience kind of thing where it's let us explain to you what basically has happened, because there wasn't a lot of that, and I kind of appreciated that. It was just you could still follow. Maybe you might not understand what's happening in a scene, but in a few minutes later, you will have put the pieces together and have understood, I don't know, 90% of what happened. Mm-hmm. Personally, I appreciated that, because to me the movie felt less of a narrative and more of not saying this is true, because I don't think it was probably impossible to tell, but it really felt more this is what happened, and if you can't follow, well, enjoy the music. That's the problem though, because it's not what happens. See, I would appreciate it more if I felt this was a more accurate retelling of the events, then I wouldn't be as peeved by it. But since this is, in a lot of ways, a work of fiction, I'm really curious to know how much of it is, how it really was, and how much of it is fiction, how much of it isn't. Apparently, the movie's based on a document that was released that is fairly accurate, step by step, to the procedure that over the years that led up to bin Laden's execution or assassination, but the movie is kind of based on that document, but I'm not aware of how accurate to that document it stayed.
Yeah, and then there's certain things where I wonder if this was rushed to kind of capitalize on the hype, so to speak, because this movie came out a year and a half after Osama bin Laden was killed. So
it was very soon after.
Yeah, so I do have to wonder how quickly was this just kind of thrown together, and how much of this might have just kind of been a I don't want to use the term cash grab.
See, the movie did not feel like a cash grab at all to me.
It just felt
which is interesting.
It just feels like making a movie like this, making a movie that tells the story of Osama bin Laden, the raid on him in particular, the lead up to finding him, and then the actual raid on the compound. Making that movie so soon, 18 months, literally, that's a shorter development time than a lot of actual full on movies, live action movies. That is a very short turnaround time.
That is very true.
And so it does feel short. It feels like they were rushing it. No matter which way you slice it, it feels like this movie was definitely made as quickly as possible to take advantage of the recency of the event. Because here's the thing about a historical drama, history happened, it's not going anywhere. So
that's very interesting. I really didn't feel at all that it was rushed. Just the vibe I got from watching it. And did you feel that way throughout?
There were certain points where I don't know if I want to say rushed, because it's a professionally made movie, obviously. And there's nothing there's a few errors that I want to talk about, but like there's nothing in it, I guess, that's overly glaringly obvious. That's like, it's not like it's not like a Game of Thrones where you see like a Starbucks cup on the table or something, and it's like, how quickly were we just trying to rush through this that no one caught that? Like, nothing like that really happens in the movie, but like, at least that I noticed. I don't know, but like, there's it just, the fact that the turnaround time was that quick leads me to question some of the motives behind making this movie. That they didn't go, okay, like, because they had to decide immediately. Like, literally, it would have had to been that, like, Osama bin Laden's killed, and then, like, all right, we're making this movie about Osama bin Laden getting killed.
Because it takes a minute to start a movie like that.
Yeah, and apparently the directors of this film, I guess, or the producers, were making... they were working on a project that was going to tell the story of the beginning of the war in Afghanistan. And then the news came out that Osama bin Laden was killed. And then they said, all right, let's just put that on the shelf. And they immediately turned around and decided to make this movie instead. Like,
I know there were... Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I know there were criticisms. See, there were criticisms coming from the government about the movie, and there were also criticisms against the government where the CIA actually revealed too much to like the Hollywood writers about what actually happened, which is very interesting because there seems to be shouting and criticisms on both sides all around this movie.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of criticism. There's a lot of torture that happens, particularly in the first half of the movie. Right. I know there's that, like, is waterboarding torture? But yes, okay, like, it's torture. Like, what's being depicted in the movie is clearly torture. They're like,
obviously,
they're waterboarding him. They're playing, like, loud music for hours.
They're stuffing him in a box.
Yeah, they're literally stuff him in a small box. Like, this is not a good thing. And part of that's, like, the fact that they decide to open the movie like that, I feel like it puts a bad taste in your mouth about a couple of the characters initially, because it's like, maybe they're on the right side. Like, we all agree Osama bin Laden's a horrible person, and catching him is a good idea. And, like, but, like, the fact that we're showing these people right off the bat is just, like the first scene is, like, them torturing this dude. And it's
the first thing you hear is the some of the cell phone calls coming around 9/11, people in the tower, people in the plane, and it's black, and it fades from that to the scene where they have that suspect and they're trying to get information out of him, torturing him. Some people campaigned this movie as being like, "Hey, it's way too." This is basically propaganda saying we should do torture. That thought never even occurred to me. I thought it was just it's a part of war. This stuff happens, and like all these people died, and they're trying to get information out of this dude, and he's not given it, even though he knows it. The thought that it was trying to justify, like make a very strong political point for or against torture, that thought never occurred to me. Maybe I was just oblivious to it.
Well, there's discussion,
like, very matter of fact.
Yeah, it's just like this is the thing that happened.
Because torture, I mean. It's like it's definitely a thing where, like, yeah, you can easily go too far with it, and like you can get people who just like have a fetish with torturing people, and they like that, and like that's a problem. And like it's not just like you can't just throw a blanket statement over torture and be like all of it's good or like all of it's bad.
I mean, torture. I feel like you cannot throw a blanket statement over interrogation. I think the word torture sort of connotes an extra, you're causing physical pain and misery, and I think there's an interesting question there as to like there's got to be a humane line, and I guess you could say like, well, is solitary confinement a form of torture? What is torture?
Exactly.
What isn't torture?
But there is a line somewhere.
Yeah, and like you do want to make sure it's like you don't want to. You can't just comfort yourself and say, well, we're the good guys, and so the ends justify the means. It's like you do have to have a moral high ground somewhere where it's like we cannot go, like, even if, like, we do not want to, like, lose our soul. It's kind of Munich in a way, that whole discussion, like, this doesn't feel like righteousness. It's like, where do you go too far? And it's like some forms of interrogation, like are definitely, it's a good, like, obviously extracting information from captured enemies is just a time-honored technique that works well. Like, there's obviously torture that crosses the line where it's like, okay, I don't think we should do that. It's interesting the way the movie actually sets it up, where they're like waterboarding him, they're, you know, doing all this, they're putting him in the box, and then it seems like they're trying to get information about an attack that they think is going to happen, but they don't know like when or where. And
yeah, what were they trying to? Was it about an attack?
So there's an attack. Here's the thing, though. The attack happens on May 29th, 2004, but like the first time that we see him is 2003, I believe, is what the like date card says when the movie you know, the movie uses date and location titles constantly. To the point where it's actually slightly unnecessary in certain scenes, if you want my full honest opinion. But
it gives it that era of it being genuine and like trying to be
to an extent. I found it unnecessary. The one at the very beginning for when it says September 11th, 2001, I'm like, was that necessary? Did anyone not know what is gonna happen here? And then also the black site undisclosed location one made me chuckle a little bit. Like, so we've put up a title card that basically just says nowhere. Like, that's essentially what we did.
Might as well call it Utopia. Cause that's what Utopia means.
Yeah.
Nowhere. That's definitely not Utopia.
Yeah, that's a very...
In the cultural connotations. But I think the point of that torture was that Maya, the protagonist, she got like an unintentional lead out of that whole endeavor where she found what she believed to be bin Laden's courier. Like, she got that name out of him, and that ended up turning into this whole lead that directed the whole rest of the movie.
Yeah, but what's interesting is he gives them most of the information they want after the attack has happened, and then they tell him, you know, they bluff him out and say like, oh, well, actually, you gave us this information, we stopped an attack because, you know, you gave us information you don't remember because we kept you awake for 96 hours or whatever. And then they're giving him food, and they're giving him, you know, like, you know, they're having like a nice dinner with him, basically, like as a reward, quotation marks, for helping them, even though he didn't. That's when he gives him all this information. And you could say, well, the movie could be sort of making a little bit of a statement there, because it's like when they were torturing him, he didn't give them anything. But you could say the torture got him to that point where now we're having a nice meal and we're not torturing him at all. We're actually like treating him very well, and now he's like just handing over information. Yeah. So
I mean, and the movie even doesn't cast a super positive light on torture. Like, the guy who's doing the torturing is like, I need a break from this. And then the woman, the protagonist, when she first sees torture, you know, she can barely stomach it at first, but she tries to push through. So like, it doesn't, like, you know, I feel like if it was like torture propaganda to be like, this, like, it's necessary, we need it, it's all good, like, they would portray the people. It makes
you feel
being fine with it or something.
Yeah, it makes you feel extremely uncomfortable.
It does, yeah.
There's a couple comments later on in the movie where they're like, oh, if we could do the, like, whatever, enhanced interrogation or something, like, we could maybe find something more out, but, like, we're not supposed to do that anymore. And it's like, you could interpret that as being pro-torture, because it's almost like they're complaining, like, oh, we can't talk to whatever guys.
Well, if those people actually felt that way, which I would imagine they would, if you're on the war front, the battlefront, where your life's on the line, I can imagine you want to use whatever means possible to get your job done and to stay alive and to be efficient. So, to me, that's, see, I don't know what they actually thought, those characters, but that seems very reasonable and what would be thought by those characters.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that those particular people in real life wouldn't have said something like that. I'm just saying, like, the movie might be, by including that line in the script, so to speak. I don't know. It's hard to say exactly, because you could say it's depicting torture kind of negatively, just by, like, how brutal and horrible it is. But then it's also like, well, you know, it got some results, so
Yeah, I didn't really feel like that was even a significant point in the movie. That was just something that the critics.
The torture goes on
out.
a pretty long time, though. Like, a pretty decent amount of screen time is dedicated to it. So,
but to me, it was never like, I never felt like they were trying intentionally to make a statement about it. Like, obviously, like, to me, it is kind of curious how they kept it on screen so much.
Like, they want you to be aware of it. They don't just have it be like, they don't have a character walk into a room and be like, oh, we just interrogated, Steve, the terrorist, and he told us, this, that, and the other thing.
I wonder if it's intended to be that brutal, so that way you can appreciate Maya's, or not even appreciate, but just understand Maya's character more. Because you can see how she is a woman who can, although at first just barely, but she can stomach that stuff. And you kind of understand her more. You come to admire her as a woman who, like, gets stuff done and is willing to go whatever means, being full of confidence and ambition while also being smart and keeping
But the other thing is, again, like, I just feel like with Maya's character, like, she feels very hollow to me just because we don't know. Like, I don't. Her character's like nothing. She's like just this. She's just like a competent at her job person. Like, that's her character. She's just like, I don't know, CIA person who gets things done. And it's
the way I felt was like, I felt the main question of the movie. Because I was gonna bring it up later, but I'll just bring it up now. The movie kind of leaves you thinking, like, was it worth it at the very end? Which I think is kind of cliche and very stereotypical thing. It's kind of like Munich, was it worth it? I feel like the question it really leaves you with was like, so what was it that was compelling her? Because something definitely was, like, her drive. Like, what is her drive? She obviously has it. Like, where is that coming from? To me, that seemed like that was her depth, and that felt very deep to me. I was like, what is it that she's after? Because she already has this drive before her friend dies. And after her friend dies, then she becomes even more ingrained. She has a quote, something that's like, she feels like she was left alive to see this thing through.
Yeah.
Which that becomes, I guess you could say, her main motivation after that point. But even before that point, she's already driven. And so you kind of have to ask yourself, what was it? Like, it kind of leaves you being like, what was this all about?
I mean, it was about killing Osama bin Laden, ultimately.
Right, but what was killing Osama about? Like, in Munich, it's all about, is this all for land? Is it all worth it? And there's a similarity between Munich and this movie, which is that the movie seems to be saying, this isn't about nation states or politics, but to her it's personal, and to the radicals it's they're radicals. It's religious. I
guess to me, like, it doesn't feel personal to me. Like, it's like she just. I mean, after her friends dies, it seems like she's like a little more like, yeah, because like my friend died, but also like we don't see her and her friends, like, it doesn't really feel like a friendship. Like, they're just co-workers. Like, they're hanging out at that restaurant for one scene and they have a brief moment together, like, but it just doesn't feel very friendly. And then it, like, that turns out to be like the Marriott in Islamabad that got bombed.
It is pretty shallow. And then like they're texting and like, oh, I guess they're kind of close, and then she dies and then she's really sad. But like, see, the thing is, I know people like her where it's they don't reach out a lot, but you can tell they do feel. And at the same time, this movie really was, there were so many scenes it was trying to show you that it really kind of skipped over, like, showing you the friendship side of things.
So maybe
they really
what
did.
I'm saying though is it should have like been like a slightly narrower focus, or it could have been, you could have had like the ensemble cast more. Like, you could have had this team that you're showing working to hunt down Osama bin Laden, like, and doing like the whole thing, and then when some of them die, like, it might be more impactful if we got to actually like care about them as people, like, before we see them die, like because like they try and be cutesy. She's like, oh, I'm making him a cake, like, so what happens in the movie, the one lady whose name I do not remember because she's forgettable, respect to the actual person that died, because this is a real event that happens, like there were 7 individuals that died in the attack, and like nothing but respect to those individuals. I'm purely talking about the way that the movie portrays this character. Like, so she's going to meet with an informant, and it's at I think it's at Bagram or one other major U.S. base in Afghanistan, and the informant's gonna drive in. They're gonna talk to him, and she's like, "Oh, I'm making him a cake, to celebrate him like coming and talking to us." And it's like, I don't know if that's supposed to be like, because like Maya even says like, like Afghans don't really like celebrate that way or whatever. Like, I don't know if it's supposed to be another thing about like Americans not really understanding the culture of the people that we're dealing with.
I think it just shows you like how different like that style, that approach to it. Like, hey, we're just gonna work things out. I'm gonna make him a cake. This is great. Like that style of getting things done does not work in that context, and that it took the personality of Maya to see it all the way through.
Yeah, and then like
because they're very different techniques, those two.
But then the informant shows up. Turns out he had like a suicide vest on, kills himself, kills 7 other people, injures several more. There's a whole scene about like in that scene, it's like it seems like he's gonna get spooked off at first by like the gate guards, and then she's like, "I told you, like, we arranged this. You're not gonna have to deal with any like guards or whatever. Like, we don't want to like spook him or whatever." And it's like, if you
did that actually happen?
So an actual bombing did happen. Yes, I don't know what the full details were about like guards situation or whatever, but like yes, like actual people died in this bombing. So like, if you have to like tell someone that you're not gonna like security screen them to get them to meet with you, like that's probably a good sign that they're gonna do something that the security would have stopped them from doing. Like if
absolutely,
like it's like I don't
definitely
know,
a dumb move.
So I don't know if that was a real thing that happened, and for some reason they just decided to go along with that anyway, or if that's some sort of weird movie nonsense. But either way, it's a little bit silly.
It's one of those moments I really want to know what actually happened. Like, did it really fall? Like, I could see that happening where, like, occasionally, even in the military, someone makes a dumb decision that you just go, okay, why? I mean, for Pete's sakes, look at the Civil War and look at all the decisions the Northern generals made. Like, sometimes people make idiotic decisions. So, like, part of me is like, okay, I could see that happening, but at the same time, it's like, it does make a great movie plot point that's like, it gets you on the edge of your seat and you're like, no, don't do it. Like go into the spooky house at night by yourself to investigate a mysterious noise. Like, who would in their right mind would do that? But it gets you on the edge of your seat.
Okay, yeah.
So I could kind of see it going either way, where it's like, did that really happen?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
So it happened. It did indeed happen at Camp Chapman, and it was December 30th, 2009, which is the way I found it so quickly because I wrote down every time there was a date in this movie, I wrote down the date so I could try and like cross-reference it later. Nice. So basically, the guy arrived at the camp. He was waved through 3 security checkpoints without stopping before arriving at its destination.
There you go.
16 people were waiting for the car near a building set up to debrief al-Balawi. Al-Balawi got out of the vehicle and detonated explosives hidden in a suicide vest. So al-Balawi and 9 other people were killed by the blast. 7 CIA personnel. Yeah.
That'll do it.
Yeah.
Donkey.
So
that was a dumb decision.
Don't just agree to meet with people if you're normally screening everybody, and then for some reason this guy doesn't get screened. Seems like a little bit of a lapse, and it's like
it really kind of shows you that like you have to be that hardcore individual to see these things through. At least that's what the movie seems to be saying, because Maya would definitely have the smarts not to do that if she was in that.
You would hope, like, and it's also like who. It's like you're fighting an enemy that like commonly uses these types of tactics. So like, why would you not? It's just, that's like a weird, I don't want to armchair general this, but like it is a weird situation where it's like, why would you just, I don't know if that's a common thing to try and gain their trust, like, oh, we're not going to screen you, but it's like, yeah, it doesn't sound like a smart move though. It's like,
well, it does kind of, yeah, it does kind of feel like that does feel like a smite against cultural narratives that are kind of like, we all just need to get along, be friends, and this movie seems to be saying like, nope, you're gonna get screwed over if you try to do that, if you follow that principle to a T. Because she was being very generous in trying to invite that guy over, and she's like making him a cake, and they're just gonna let him bypass all the screenings to show him that they were friends. Like, this is a great moment. Nope, that's not how it was.
There's another scene shortly after that, like where Maya's like talking to a dude in an armory about, like, I think it's one of the guys, it's like some field operative that, would theoretically go out and like nab people for her, but like they can't do it in this particular situation because they weren't ready to go get this guy. And she's like, why aren't you doing this? And he's like, oh, it's dangerous out there, which is kind of like, well, yeah, that's your job. But like the guy's like taking off his tactical vest, and like he takes his handgun out, which he's carrying like he's doing like small back carry, just in the waistband is what it looks like, which feels like a weird, like, I don't know, like if you're already rocking a full on like tactical vest, like putting a pistol in small of your back waistband, like you're not really. Like, I know there are people who conceal pistols that way. A lot of like former cops and some actual cops like carry backup guns like that. It's just, it doesn't really make sense to do it in that situation if you're already like high visibility with your other equipment that you're wearing. It's like you might as well just rock it in a better holster at that point, like, on your thigh. But anyway, so he's got it. He pulls it out. And then he totally flags Maya with this pistol. Like, that's like a little part of the movie that made me go, like, was there not a weapon handler on set? He totally flags Maya with the muzzle of this pistol. And then what's hilarious is it's not even like, you shouldn't do that anyway, but like, he pulls it out, totally completely flags it with her, like pointed at her face, basically. Like, it's not like he's aimed down on her, it's just the way he's holding it like sideways in front of him, like happens to basically be pointed more or less at her face. Like, and then he like takes the magazine out and checks the chamber to make sure it's clear. And it's just like this, right. This really like, dude, like gun safety, like not doing so hot here in this scene. Whatever, like that kind of stood out to me a little bit. Yeah. Not that that's important to the overall plot of the movie, but like it just caught my eyes. Like, if this guy's supposed to be like some sort of professional CIA, hitman like guy, I don't think that he would handle his firearm in that particular way. I don't know. I know some guys that are in groups like that get a little like reckless and nonchalant with certain things, but that just felt like a little bit egregious. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, the whole I'm back to my notes. I'm working through my notes here. This is where I actually wrote down the stuff about, this is the point in the movie too where there's the drama between her and like her boss about, what she should be working on, and she's like, I should go after UBL. And again, it kind of is like this whole thing where it's like kind of just feels like Maya against the world, and it's like I would have appreciated it maybe more, and it would have been more realistic. And because again, that's one of the criticisms I heard from actual State Department people is like it should have probably been more of like showing a team effort rather than just like one person just having like the drive to carry all this stuff through.
Well, of course, the government would say that.
Yeah, of course.
They want you to think.
Yeah. We need all these. It's like it's just a jobs program. The CIA is just a jobs program. They just employ a bunch of incompetent people, so that way you can boost those employment numbers. Really, there's just Maya getting stuff done. This is the only competent person in the CIA.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah. It just seems like a little Hollywood to me, though. Like, just that plot line.
Yeah, probably.
Oh, then she gets, there's an attempted hit on Maya as well. And it's not, like, said, like, it's not like they know whether it's because they know she's CIA. They might just because she's an American working in Pakistan. And, you know, if you're an American known to be connected to the government in some way or another working in Pakistan, there's a good chance that maybe people are going to put a hit out on you. Like, yeah, that's understandable. Her car does not look like an up-armored car, but they later...
Apparently it is.
Apparently it is. And I know it is common for groups operating, like government groups operating in some of these areas to have like up-armored Mercedes and stuff like that. It's just that the particular car she's driving does not look like that at all.
It was like some kind of Toyota Camry looking thing.
Yeah, and like she gets shot at, like she gets like basically mag dumped with an AK and an MP5. The MP5, like, you don't have to have like that much up armoring to stop 9mm, but like 7.62 by 39, like you need some pretty hardcore bulletproof glass to stop full on rifle rounds. So when they have that comment later, like, oh, you know, maybe next time there won't be bulletproof glass to save you. It's like that felt again a little bit Hollywood because it's like, well, it shouldn't have.
What? Yeah, like
so,
what guns do we have in the closet we can use for this scene today? Oh, we got
it's like
got an AK. No kidding.
Yeah, if they both just had like handguns, like that would have been more believable. But like the fact that like they have some full on assault rifles and they can't manage to kill her in this like very not up armored looking car
at close range.
Yeah, that's seemed a bit much to
I remember
me.
thinking that like they might as well be stormtroopers, those two.
Yeah. So anyway,
not the Nazi stormtroopers, the Star Wars stormtroopers.
Anyway, they eventually find the lead that she is going after, Abu Ahmed, who's this, you know, messenger for Bin Laden. And they follow him back to the compound, and they start putting the compound under surveillance, and they start to think that maybe it might actually be Osama bin Laden in this compound. And they're kind of... This is actually part of the movie that I like more. I like this whole, like, reconnaissance and being in the control room, and they're talking about, like,
cool.
We did this analysis, and, like, look, there's, you know, this is woman number 1, woman number 2, like, man number 1, man number 2, there's 7 children, and like this person goes inside and you can tell from the way they move, they're moving slowly, so this is like an older person or whatever. And like I liked that. Like that felt like they were actually like explaining the spy stuff a little bit and doing some like actual analysis work. Like that was kind of fun and cool. And then they're like, and look at this, and it was like, that's not the same woman, like the one that just came back outside. Like we can tell because of, you know, like the way they're moving and stuff. Like, and it's like, so that means woman female number 3. And that means there's probably male number 3, and we don't know who male number 3 is. And like that was like cool. Like that was cool to have that part of the movie. Like I liked that spy scene where they're like talking about how they're gonna like deal with this compound and stuff like that. Like
yeah, the end of the movie was I watched it on Amazon Prime, and Amazon Prime has these things where you can actually there's like commentaries. There's like commentary. If you pause the movie, like commentaries appear on the screen that tell you about like goofs or just insightful things. And one of them mentioned that like it was some ridiculous amount of film was actually shot just in that last, just to get that last raid scene.
Yeah, I can
Team
imagine.
6.
Yeah,
like vast majority of the film was done right there, which I thought was interesting.
This is also where we bring in Chris Pratt as a Navy SEAL.
Yeah, I forgot. Like they waited till like that last like half hour to bring in Chris Pratt into the movie.
Yeah,
which I guess is fine. It was kind of a nice like, oh, he's in it. Okay.
It's just like, I mean, he works. Like he's actually not like too like he works pretty well in this movie. Like he's not. Mm-hmm. He's not like Andy Dwyer or something. Like he actually kind of works as the Navy SEAL.
It's like Bruce Willis or something.
Yeah. Well, I like that. Like I feel like portraying the military accurately is always hard, and I feel like they did a decent job with this, where, like, it's not like I've spent a lot of time around team guys, but, like, I've talked to a few people, and, like, they're hardcore guys, like, and they're tough, and they know how to do stuff that not that many other people can do to the same ability and extent that they can do, but also they're, like, dudes. Like, and the movie does a decent job of showing that they're, like, they're dudes doing dude stuff, and also they're, like, some hardcore mofos that know how to, like, kick in doors and murder people. So, I mean...
It was a very interesting little bit of dialogue when I didn't know the hit scene would be so long where they go into the compound for Bin Laden.
Mm-hmm.
It was very drawn out, and I mean, all of it I thought was very well done. It looked like it was hard to film.
I almost wish...
Apparently, they filmed it twice.
Okay.
They filmed it with the night one with night vision, and then all again without the night vision.
I would have appreciated more of the night vision. That's one of the notes I made, that I feel like there was a little too much just like blackness. And
it was very dark. It was hard to see if you're in a bright room.
Yeah, and I feel like the thing is like our perspective is with the SEAL team, and they're all wearing night vision. So like, why not just show most of the raid in night vision? You know what I mean?
It does set the mood. They both have different moods associated with them. If it's just the dark, you kind of get this very dark feel. Like, this is real.
The other thing I didn't quite like about the raid scene, and again, this is like the same thing that we kind of touched on earlier. Just in this case, I feel like there's even less of an excuse for not having it, because it would be much more realistic. They obviously would be a very abridged version that you'd get in the movie. Because a real briefing would take way too long to actually show in a movie if you did like a real briefing in real time. But like, there's no briefing scene with the SEALs. There's no like, okay, like Alpha Team is going to do this and Bravo Team is going to do this. They don't show you that. Like, right. So part of why I wish there was is because you don't even really know, like, you don't know how well the raid's going. Like, it seems like they're encountering problems and then they're like adjusting to deal with the problems. But it's like, how important was it that they didn't make it through that door the way they thought they'd make it through that door? Like, you know what I mean? There's no, like, explanation of, like, people just do things and you don't really know, like, the overall plan. And
I wonder, would we actually even know exactly what the SEAL Team 6's exact plan was?
Well, we know more about it probably than they... We know more about it than they probably would have let on... had it not been for the helicopter crash. I feel like the fact that a helicopter crash kind of forced them to reveal a little more about the raid than maybe they otherwise would have. And the other thing is that what they could have done is they could have just hired, because we know what the compound looks like. So they literally could have just hired some like former Navy SEALs. I'm sure there were ex-SEALs consulting on this film. Like, there almost certainly was.
Oh,
and
that's a good point. Yeah.
I feel like they could have just hired those guys and said, hey, if you had to plan a hit on this compound because you knew there was a high-value target inside of it, how would you plan it? And then just use that, like, as your script, essentially.
Yeah.
They could have just done that. And at no point do they, like, have, like, a whole thing where it's like... There's more information out there from what I've read on Wikipedia, which I know is a great source, but whatever. Like... You know, there was like the guys that actually were supposed to make entry. There were the teams that sort of like were securing the perimeter. Like,
I was surprised at how large the team was. Like, that was a lot of dudes.
Well, you want to have overwhelming force. I mean, so there was about there's that, and also it's a big compound, and if you're trying to catch this dude or kill him, like, it makes sense. Like, okay, we need guys to pull security around the perimeter to make sure that, you know, bystanders or possible reinforcements don't come into the facility. We need guys. Those same guys, essentially, to make sure that people don't escape from the compound as we're raiding it. Like, you don't want to just send in, like, 4 dudes through the front door because maybe somebody will run out the back. So, like, you need to have all those guys. And it would have been nice to have a scene where they kind of explain that and be like, okay, like, so, you know, this team is going to do this and this team is going to do that. And this is, like, the overall operation plan. And then they go in, they kill Bin Laden's, like, sons, basically. And then they get into, like, some short...
And the courier dude.
Yeah, and the courier dude. They get into some short gunfights that are very briefly over.
Yes.
No American casualties happened during the whole raid. And then in the end, they end up killing Osama bin Laden. There's sort of some mixed reports on how the killing of Osama bin Laden went down in real life, that is. So there's sort of... And this... The way the movie shows the killing of Osama bin Laden, from what I've read in... From what I've read from the information that's out there, is the version of events that is more widely seen as accurate, according to like some of the investigation that have been done after the fact. So there's this guy, I think Robert O'Neill or something is his name, who was a Navy SEAL on the raid, and he sort of has come out as like, oh, I'm the guy that killed bin Laden, and that's sort of disputed. What like he was on the raid, like that's not like in question, and he was one of the guys that probably put bullets into bin Laden. But the way he tells the story, there's a little bit of differentiation between the way he tells it and the way other people tell it. So in the movie, bin Laden, he gets shot like peeking around the corner a little bit, or peeking out of a doorway. So he's shot from that, and then they go into the room. The point man grabs two women and like throws them on the ground. Presumably, if they had like a suicide vest on or something, he's just sort of clearing them out of the way, getting them out of the way for the other SEALs to presumably deal with bin Laden, and hopefully, if they have some sort of suicide device on them or something, just get them out of the way, get them out of the fight, try and deal with them as quickly as possible. And bin Laden's already been shot at that point by this dude on the way into the room. And then, as bin Laden's lying on the ground, two other SEAL team guys shoot him while he's already on the ground. And that is like the version of events that is apparently described as being more realistic, allegedly. So, I mean, I don't have any qualms with that, and I wasn't there, and there's not a ton of information forthcoming about exactly how that went down, so I guess I have no factual complaints to make in that particular scene.
Yeah, it all felt very like what would actually happen.
Yeah.
The SEAL team in the movie, I find their interaction pretty fascinating, and they all treat it like, I guess as they would, like it's a job, and everything's very matter of fact. And then after it's all done, like their head guy is like, dude, do you know like what you just did? Gesturing that, like he just killed bin Laden. And like they haven't even like it's like they're so hyped up on adrenaline or just this, doing your orders, that it's like, okay, now let me process what just happened. Like there's another scene when Chris Pratt is talking to their commander dude, I guess the guy who's head, and when they're on the field. And he's like, I killed the courier, like, and I killed his wife. Well, and I shot his wife. He's like, is he dead? She's like, she'll probably bleed out. It's like, oh, okay. And it's just this really weird dynamic of like, hey, like this is like my job. This is what I did. And it's like, well, that's rough, and also good job, and keep going. So I just found that fascinating.
Yeah, it was like I feel like that was. I assume that was a decent portrayal of just like, yeah, these are professionals and they're here to do a job, and it's not, well, it is an action movie, but it's not trying to portray itself as an action movie. They're not like quipping one-liners, they're just like
shooting from the hip.
Yeah, they're just like, no, we're very professional. We're here to do a job.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's no automatic gunfire. I mean, well, the terrorists seem to use automatic gunfire, but the SEAL team uses semi-automatic gunfire during the whole engagement, which is nice. That's a good realistic touch. Not just spraying bullets, it's very controlled. The only detail in the raid that I guess I can say I feel was unrealistic, like, because obviously I'm not an expert in such things, so I can't speak to, whether or not it was realistic or not for the most part, but like the only thing that peeved me a little bit. There's two things actually, but the first thing is, so in bin Laden's room, after they kill bin Laden, up on the wall, there is an AK underfolder, that is with the folding stock, and SEAL grabs it off the wall and takes it with him. Bin Laden did not. That is not the gun of Osama bin Laden. It's a weird error. Like I don't. That's part of where it feels a little lazy to me, which is weird because like a lot of the other stuff doesn't seem lazy. Like all of the SEALs seem well kitted out. Like in their gear seems pretty fully accurate and well sourced and everything. So it seems weird that this little detail would have been overlooked, but like that is clearly like a 7.62 underfolder, and it has like a long barrel on it. And the gun of UBL is an AKS-74U with the little shorty 8-inch barrel, and it's a 5.45 by 39 magazine. That's what it's chambered in, and the magazine looks quite different than the 7.62 by 39 magazine that like the more traditional older AKs have. And like I don't want to nitpick too much because like it's just weird to me that like why would you show it if you don't have the right prop? Because the thing is like the gun of UBL is well known because it's very iconic. Because like there's actual video of Osama bin Laden with that firearm, like, and that is also the firearm that is known and has been said was retrieved from his room was his little AK-74, and so it's like
it's probably a case of like. What props do we got in the closet today?
I guess it's just one
gun.
of those things where it's just it feels like if you're trying to make this accurate, it's a little annoying.
That is odd.
Yeah,
that is like if you know exactly what it should have been, why wasn't anything else?
Yeah, it just seems weird. Or it's like everyone. I shouldn't say everyone because obviously a lot of people don't even know what model. A lot of people don't even know that there is a difference between like, wait, there's an AK-74 and an AK-47. Like, how does that even work? And it's like, yes, there is. Like, but I mean, I guess a lot of people don't technically know, but it's like anyone with any familiarity with this particular subject should know and be able to catch that detail. And it's just weird to me that the prop house or whatever must not have been able to quickly get access to one of those. So it's just a little annoying to me that like they didn't do that, but oh well.
I'll hand it to you. That is annoying. It's like one of those like small things that isn't a big deal, but it's like it's obviously in your face, like not accurate.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then the other detail, they bring in a backup helicopter to because obviously one of the stealth helicopters crashed, so they have to bring in a backup helicopter to get the rest of the guys out. And they had backups on standby because, it's the military, so they're going to try and like layer things to be as redundant as possible. And so they bring the backup in, and in the movie it's a Black Hawk, just a regular unmodified Black Hawk. In real life it was not a Black Hawk, it was a Chinook. I don't know again why they made that decision. Again, it's a small detail.
Was that just a CGI thing in the movie, probably?
I don't know, because, like, why?
Because that would be easy.
I feel like, it would be, like, I doubt they got real Blackhawks to do this movie. Almost every movie where they have helicopters flying around anymore, like, they don't do real helicopters because that's expensive and dangerous. So you just, you just do CG. So I have no idea why
Even for, this is kind of a really sad side thing, but, like, even for, like, car commercials, when you're seeing a nice new car driving down, like, 95%, like I can almost guarantee, like that's not the actual vehicle. They actually have this weird like thing that drives around with like a cool contraption on it with like cameras that project in the car image.
I have seen that. Yeah.
Those are cool. But anyways, the point is like
it was a CG. It's like why didn't you just use the right model? Like that's literally the only question that I have is like why did you use? And again, it's a small thing. Like it's a small thing to have the wrong helicopter. But also, like, it would make more sense for it to be a Chinook than a Blackhawk. Like, so, because that's what it was in real life. And also the Chinook is, like, kind of better, like, at that particular job. Because the Chinook can carry more.
Maybe because the audience would recognize a Blackhawk easier? I have no idea.
Yeah, the Blackhawk maybe looks cooler to a certain group of people.
It's like eating your breakfast cereal with like a regular breakfast spoon or like a dinner-sized, like huge unnecessary spoon. Like, it gets the job done. I I don't know how well this analogy is holding up.
Well, the Chinook amusingly
it's just a little odd.
The Chinook is the huge dinner-sized spoon because the Chinook is the giant double rotor, crazy big helicopter.
Not comparing with not necessarily size, but like it's just an odd
making it
choice.
Look, it's just strange. It's like why didn't you just have the real thing that they used? Like why is there a Black Hawk?
That is interesting they use that because if they're trying to be stealth with those whole stealth Blackhawks and then you bring a Chinook in, like, well, that's obviously...
Well, I think it's because I think they knew that... I think they only had, like, a limited number of these stealth helicopters available.
Yes.
And so I think they used them to do the initial insertion, and then they knew once the shooting started that their cover was probably going to be blown pretty quickly anyway. So at that point, I think they're just like, all right, so the backup team, they come in like, the big helicopters, and they're going to be in and out before... the Pakistani Air Force can really respond anyway, so it doesn't really matter, is probably the thought process there. And the Chinook is also just great. It's just like this giant helicopter that you can load like 40 dudes on and carry all sorts of stuff. So it makes sense. Like it is a logical helicopter if you're going to have like a backup helicopter to help extract stuff, and if you're taking potentially prisoners, potentially a lot of... intelligence and stuff that you've gotten from your sensitive site exploitation, potentially bodies, obviously. Like, it makes sense to have the Chinook come in and, be able to carry all that stuff, as opposed to these stealth helicopters, which apparently the stealth helicopters were already, like, kind of borderline on weight because all that extra stealth composite stuff added a lot of weight. So their cargo capacity was allegedly, from the information that's publicly available, quite limited. So it makes sense to have like the big heavy helicopter come in to do all of your extraction stuff if you need it. But I don't know, like it's just one of those other weird choices where it's like, why did you choose to do it this way when that's just not what happens? Like, it's another one of those things that just bothers me a little bit, where it's like, it starts to feel like, were you trying to make this as accurate as possible, or were you not? Because there are, like, a couple of these, like, and you could say they're small errors, and they were small errors, but it's like, it's a known fact that was not gotten right. And so it's just strange to me that just kind of let that slip right through and don't talk about it, but whatever.
Yeah, it is just one of those annoying, odd things. But yeah, and I guess that kind of brings us to the end of the movie. And it ends with Maya being taken back to who knows where after the job is done. And she's just kind of like, it looks like she's kind of processing it all, and she just kind of like cries, and the movie cuts to black. The music was very interesting, I thought. I don't know if you noticed it at the end. It was very, it just kind of gave you like the vibe, like, well, it is what it is.
Yeah, it wasn't like very celebratory.
It wasn't dark. It wasn't celebratory. It wasn't dark. It was just kind of like, I don't know. I appreciated it. I did. It just kind of like things continue on, and it is what it is. And yep.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's just like we got UBL, and on one hand that is, what we set out to do, and like it feels good to be like, this guy wronged our country in a horrible way, and it's nice to be like, all right, we got this guy. That's who we were trying to get. We got him. We won. But at the same time, in the overall war on terror, like, not much was really changed when we got Osama bin Laden. That was
the same thing we saw in Munich, was that, like, great, you chopped the head off. Now there's, a bunch more. 2 more, so I'll take its place. And it's kind of that same idea. It's like the same concept you're wrestling with is, like, why... I really think... personally, is like, it's this idea of just justice in general, and like, what are you after? And justice is a sobering thing. It's not always like a celebratory thing. Like, I remember when it was announced that bin Laden died, like, me and my youth group, like in my church, we were actually talking about it back when I was in high school, and it was kind of like, well, I mean, I kind of related to that it really felt like how the movie ended. It's like it wasn't quite like a now what, but it was like a hey, like that was Bin Laden. He's been around for a while. 9/11 was a bit ago, but he's dead now, and it's like, it's when you're past the moment of like rage. Like, as soon as 9/11 happened, everyone's like, if we hanged Bin Laden, people probably would have been happy, but now that it's been like years afterwards, it's kind of like you have more perspective on it. And again, like you see in the movie with the CIA, they're like, hey, we're moving on to, this is probably inaccurate, like we're talking about, but everyone has a job to do. Like her job was to find Bin Laden, supposedly, and the other CIA dude was like, we need you to focus on other matters. But the idea, I think, was that like, hey, this was a while ago. We have more immediate threats, and what justice demands is that you can't just overlook an evil. Like if there's something that was wrong that was done, there is an equal like measure to bring justice. Like each action. It's kind of like an eye for an eye. Where like each action has a punishment, and even if you overlook an evil action, that punishment still should happen. That's just how justice works, like it's above any individual, and so you kind of see that dynamic, and for me, I conclude that was kind of what was driving Maya deep down. Was this sense of justice. Anyone can disagree with me, and I don't even know, maybe I'll change my opinion years later, but if I, again, critically thinking about this movie years later, but
when we reboot the podcast for the third time.
Yeah. Yes. There is a personal element to it, and for her, it's definitely not political. It's really like a personal endeavor. But even then, at the end of the movie, when she's just kind of like processing it all and she's like crying, and it cuts to black, you're like, what was that motive? What can drive an individual like that to do that, to go to the measures that they go to see something through? Like whatever it was, if it took you years in the making, like you can bet it was a real motivation. And
it could just be fake. It could just have been the actual 9/11 attacks, obviously, and that's what the movie begins with. But we never see, because that's obviously the motivation. That's obviously the motivation that a lot of American service personnel had, but like it's never directly connected to Maya. We never see like Maya, and you could say it's a stereotypical scene in a lot of like war on terror movies that you see like the main character and like they're hanging out with their buddies or whatever, and then all of a sudden like or they're with their wife or with their family, and then the news comes on and you see it's the World Trade Center has been hit by a plane. Like you could say that's a stereotypical scene. But also, like, it's the truth. If you're telling a lot of these stories that are on the subject, like, that was the motivation for a lot of these people.
Exactly.
And so then, like, to not show Maya's initial, like, well, why are you in the CIA? And specifically, you're in the CIA, and the only thing you've ever done in the CIA is, to hunt Bin Laden. And so to never show her initial motivation, to only ever like have her just be like, oh my, I'm doing this for my friends, but that was like later, like it's like I feel like
again,
it's just
it was later. We never really. That's kind of the whole mystery, I guess. You could easily argue that it's because it's a mistake on the movie, or it's kind of shallow, and that's definitely true. I think you could say that's a good argument. You can also say that it's intentionally mysterious, which is probably a weaker argument. So I feel you there, but it's just this it left an interesting like taste in my mouth, like flavor. Like it's kind of like, I don't know, like the wind. Like what when you're feeling the wind, that it's something, but you can't see it. It's like seeing the person of Maya was like, she's obviously very motivated about this, and even her acting was very great. Like it was very convincing, and it leaves you wondering, what is it that can move an individual like that? Aside, because obviously there was personal motivation, and it wasn't entirely personal, and you also know that it wasn't merely political, because she was fighting the politics essentially, which is kind of leads me to another. I feel like the second thing of depth of this movie. That's a good way to word it. You had that, the conflict of Maya and what motivates her, and then you had that one conversation between. See, I don't even know who these people were. It was in like the White House or something, between some guy who was going to take it to the president and the guy who was over Maya. Like they were talking, and
I believe it's the director of the CIA, and then Maya's immediate boss as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, those two. And he leaves this. He has this quote, which is probably one of the I think the deepest thing that he says in the movie. That's like, I'm paraphrasing. You all are very concerned about making a mistake going after bin Laden, but have you considered that not going after him is also a mistake, that bin Laden slipped through your fingers and you had him? Like, that also costs American lives, and that deals with the idea that there's a balance between being hyperactive and overcautious. Both can cost American lives, and both can look bad. Being hyperactive, you could say, like with the base bombing where Maya's friend dies, it's like, sweet, we're getting things done, and you just kind of you're not being cautious enough, and people die. And you can also look at, like, well, if you're too cautious, and you want something that's impossible, like you want a picture of like bin Laden in his bed before you go into the compound. Like, if you're overcautious, well, things are going to slip through your fingers and nothing's ever going to get done, and that means blood is still going to be on your hand because you had the opportunity and you passed it up. So it's this weird tension that kind of briefly gets a little highlighted moment in the movie, which I thought was pretty insightful. And it's also true, like, one, if bin Laden slips through your fingers, that's bad. And then two, in a way, he really is connected to the immediate Al-Qaeda threats, which were, the London bombings in Times Square. Because although bin Laden probably wasn't solely responsible for those attacks, you can bet your darnest that he was supporting and encouraging and a significant influence in that community of terror. When you kill him, more people take his place. But again, you deal with the issue of, this guy was responsible for a specific attack, and therefore he should receive a punishment that's in response to that initial evil of like 9/11.
And it's interesting to think about too. So there's been some discussion, and this is now no longer really as much a discussion about the movie as much as it is a discussion about the actual event. Because obviously Osama bin Laden was shot during the raid, and he was shot like immediately. Like I said, like, and this part is seemingly agreed upon, that basically as soon as he peeked his head out of the door, he was fired upon, and he was not armed at the time. But I feel like if we had allowed Osama bin Laden to die of any cause other than American action, it would have been like the ultimate failure of the war on terror. Because
that's a good point.
Like, this is the guy. Like, this is the guy who was responsible for 9/11 ultimately. And if they had let him, on the off chance that he could have even been wearing, a suicide vest or had a hand grenade or something, like, and set it off or done something to, like, take himself out and maybe a few other people with him, like, no, it's like, this guy has to die. Like, we all know he's going to die. It's one of those things where it's like, you don't want to be like, look, we all know he's guilty, so what if we just kill him? Like, I understand the danger with that line of thinking. It's like, I understand you still want, like, due process in an ideal world, and you want to take people to court, and you want to, like, show their sins to the world, and then you're going to say, okay, like, justice be done, and we are going to, like, execute you for your crime. But it's also, with Osama bin Laden in particular, it's, like, such a foregone conclusion that this man is going to die if America gets a hold of him. And it's like, it would be such a failure to let this man die on his own terms. Like, whether that's of old age, of just waiting out his days, or whether that's, he kills himself. There's something that seems wrong. Yeah, if he kills himself, like, we cannot allow this man to die on his own terms. Like, it has to be us that kills him. Like, and that's essentially what happened. It's like, okay, well, as soon as you see him, just let him have it. And that's what they did. I mean, I've according to what what they've said is like, oh, if he had, presented himself with his hands up or whatever, we would have, captured him and taken him prisoner. And it's like, and maybe that was true. Like, maybe if he did just come out with his hands up, they would have, taken him prisoner. But, like, I think they were prepared to take literally any action that he could have done other than maybe just like standing there with his hands above his head, like as he's hostile, like get rid of him.
Like they didn't waste 1 second. Like they were in and they were out.
Yeah, there was no hesitation. It was just like, we are here to kill this man. That's the job today.
And I guess that's kind of a very safe way of bringing up, like, it kind of brings an impartialness to it, where it's like, this is the job and it's going to get done, and we're not going to draw it out unnecessarily. We're not going to beat the guy first and then kill him like one bullet. That's what it took, that's what it's going to take. Of course they shoot those few bullets into him just to make sure that he's dead.
Yeah, I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure if that's to make sure he's dead. I think that might just be hey, it's Osama bin Laden, and we're in a room with him, and he's on the ground dead, and we all have guns, and I'm just gonna shoot him a few more times because it's gonna make me feel good. Like, and I would have no qualms. Like, I know in a lot of situations that seems really dark, but again, this particular individual we're talking about. It's like, okay, if you want to shoot him a few more times while he's on the ground, like, I might have honestly done the same thing, like, if I was in that room. So, like,
to me, it looked like they were treating him with the same way they killed, like, the other guy in the staircase.
They
like,
did, but they did it a little bit
someone?
more. Like, they would kill someone and they'd shoot him again when they were on the ground just to make sure they're dead. But, like, in his case, it was like they shot him and then they shot him like 4 or 5 more times once he was already on the ground.
Gotta be sure. Yep.
Yeah, we gotta make sure. Just like, it would have been, if this was a comedy movie, it would have just been like every SEAL in the stack, like, as they come into the room, just like shoots him like twice, like, while he's on the ground. Just everyone gets their turn to shoot bin Laden.
If this movie was Star Wars, then he wouldn't have died, and he would have made a clone of himself and then reappeared exactly according to his plan 30 or 60 years later.
Yeah, but yeah, bin Laden's clone appears like, I don't know, there's like George Bush and Barack Obama like have a lightsaber duel in an underground chamber, and they kill the zombie bin Laden or something. He's like, he like has all, like, instead of like 1,000 Star Destroyers rising up from the ground, it's like 1,000 like 737s, like, to go commit more.
Dark. That's dark. Throw that in South Park or something.
Oh no, it is. It fully is. But anyway, yeah. Oh well. This movie. That's a note to end on. Let's end on a dark humor note. There we go.
Dark humor note. Bam lamb.
But this movie was something. I'm not even sure if I don't know if I would recommend this movie. Like, that's how torn I am about it, because it's like, I'm not sure how, like, there's some things about the movie that are accurate, but there's also some parts that just clearly aren't. And it's not an enjoyable movie to sit through. And not all movies have to be enjoyable, like, because you could say it's telling an event that's important, that really happened, but it's like, since we don't know how accurate this movie is, I'm not, like, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm not even sure if I would totally recommend it to someone. Like, I guess if you are interested in this subject of the death of Osama bin Laden and the war on terror, and that's something that you're interested in, then by all means watch this movie. But, like, this is not like an action movie that you put on because you want to see, you know, heroes kill bad people. That's not what this movie is at all. So
that's true. I definitely feel different. I totally respect all of your objections to it, or like the things, your criticisms, whatever, and I think they're valid. I definitely did enjoy this movie, as in, like, I appreciated it. I feel like I totally would recommend it to someone else. But, like, I'm not in the habit of, like, recommending super heavy movies in general. Like, you know, like, what should we watch tonight? Like, we just want to be entertained. I'm not going to say, like, oh, Zero Dark 30, or like, yes. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're in the mood where it's like, you know, like, I thought of, like, we could do this because it's 4th of July weekend, and it's also where the U.S. troops are pulling out of Afghanistan.
Yes, that is another contemporary event, is that the U.S. is leaving Afghanistan as we speak.
So I felt like they're going to leave it on September 11th is when they plan to be out.
And as of just a few days ago, Bagram, however you pronounce that, has been evacuated, which was like the last large U.S. facility. So it's relatively small numbers is what's even left. So it's sort of that whole thing of like, what did we accomplish, I guess, in the movie. It's like this movie's 10 years after 9/11 is when it's set. Because that's when bin Laden's killed. And it's 10 years further down the line from that is where we are now. And what's happening? Like, we're leaving, and the Taliban is making big gains again in Afghanistan. And it's like, well, what did we...
Do we expect anything different? Like, honestly, all of history has, as soon as Rome, after Rome, whatever, I guess Greece and Alexander the Great and everything, ever since that point, there's been a repeating pattern of like the Middle East just doing their thing, getting all involved, and then some Western power comes in, conquers them all, or like spanks them, and like sorts things out, sort of, and then just kind of awkwardly trickles out and leaves.
Because we don't have the will to stay. Because
exactly.
It's like,
and then the same thing happens over and over and over again.
Because it's like, what's in Afghanistan? What's worth having? Nothing. Like, it's important to the people that live there, but there's no real... Like, there's nothing like... There's really no strategic reason to want to control Afghanistan. Like, there's not like... It's not like, Kuwait. There's not like some big oil reserve. It's like... It's a mountainous country, which makes it even easier for insurgents to operate. It's... It's one of those things where it's like, I feel like it's an example of mission creep. Like, it's like we went in to get revenge for 9/11, and then we sort of went into the nation building business, and we're like, well, I guess we have to try and fix this whole country, but we don't have the will or the really long-term determination to do that. And the question is, of course, also like, well, maybe it's not our job. But then you sort of have this thing where it's like, well, we sort of went in and screwed everything up, so is it our job to fix it? It sort of feels like we went in and we, messed the place up, we turned the room upside down, and then we said, okay, well, let's try and clean it up. And then we kind of, like, halfway through, we're kind of like, okay, like, I don't know. I know I sort of helped cause this mess, and I was justified in causing the mess initially, because, like, you guys were hiding, like, this dude that murdered a bunch of our people, but now we're, like, kind of not committed to this anymore, so we gotta go. And it's a very hard decision to make. Like, I understand how it sucks. It sucks being in this country for so long. And it's also, it's like an unrulable place. Like, even thinking of the whole thing as being one country is kind of an oversimplification. Really, there's a lot of tribal stuff going on where it's like there is no government in some of these parts of Afghanistan. Like, it's just like the tribal people that live there, and they've been doing their own thing since way before the West got there, and they're basically still doing their own thing, and they're probably going to keep doing it after we leave. And Taliban's got a pretty good chance. I don't know if we'll let them fully take back over. I feel like we're going to leave. I feel like if we let the Taliban just fully take back over, I don't know, like, that just seems kind of crazy that we would just fully accept that. And maybe the Afghan government will be able to actually survive. I just don't have a ton of faith in them, if I'm being totally honest.
Yeah, it's probably going to look like another Syria, which is going to cause a lot of death. But it's like this weird, awkward civil war in between. It's probably going to be another super long, drawn-out civil war that's not going to resolve itself anytime soon. I don't know. It's like encouraging, like, there's an abusive marriage or something, and then like you encourage someone to get a divorce, and then you're like, sweet, and then you leave, and you got, like, you've created this mess, and like, what are you going to do now? Because I mean, aside that you don't see, I guess, in really any American film or portrayal of these events, like, you see why we went to the Middle East, our motivation, but like, not a lot of people, and I myself too, I'm not very super well educated on like just the geopolitical climate of the Middle East before the U.S. got involved. Like, bin Laden was actually bringing stability to a lot of the Middle East that Saudi Arabia, I think, liked. Like, in the fact that there wasn't anarchy.
Well, we supported Bin Laden. I mean, we gave him weapons. That's another fun tidbit that gets left out of,
there you go.
our modern
because
history a lot. Well, he was fighting. He was fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan before.
Yeah.
He was fighting us eventually, but so we were giving the Mujahideen all sorts of support because we were happy to like help these guys fight the Soviets, and then they turned around and bid us, and
yep,
that's a bit of a problem. So
yep. So it's like there was relative.
Yeah, there's this horrible
but
picture.
It was bad.
I mean, I love it, but I also hate it. There's this horrible picture of I don't know how close they are. Like, they're probably not parked in the exact same spot. I don't know if it's taken at Bagram or if it's taken at another airfield in Afghanistan. But it's an Su-25, which is a Soviet ground attack plane, and it's like you can tell it's an older photo. It's black and white. It's a little grainier, and it's this it's just the picture of the Su-25 parked on the ramp of this airfield, and it's got like the mountain range in the background. It looks very beautiful. Like, if it wasn't for the fact that there's a horrible war going on where tons of people are dying. It's a very cool picture, and the picture is next to that picture. It's one picture, but it's got two photos contained within it, and next to that picture is a modern photo, and it's an A-10, which is an American ground attack aircraft, and it's parked in what appears to be almost the exact same spot, and you can see the same mountain range in the background behind it, and it's like, yeah, this is an unrulable place. Like, it's just what it is, and so many empires have tried, and apparently no one ever learns, and this is what we end up with. So,
yep.
I don't know. On that dark note, sorry. All right, sorry everyone. Shouting at Screen's political podcast coming soon.
There we go. Well, it's very appropriate to the film.
Yeah.
And it connects the film to modern times. Not that the film wasn't about modern times.
Yes.
Yeah.
But all right. What did we learn, Paul? What did we learn?
That Afghanistan is unruly and Hollywood likes making movies about it.
Hollywood likes making movies about war. War is bad, but movies about war is good, I think.
If there's world peace, how in the world what would the movies be about?
Yeah, what would the movies be? It would be boring. So that's what we need.
Guys, we can't have world peace.
We need war. Yeah. We need war for movies. All right.
Exactly.
Thank you for listening to this incredibly uplifting episode of Shouting at Screens. Tune in next time when we talk about Black Widow, probably, or maybe the Tomorrow
Black
War.
Widow.
One of those two, probably. I'd
yes,
guess.
probably.
So, all right. Have a good day, everyone.